NTD News, I'm Jasmina Davis. Here are today's top stories. President Trump, rounding off his visit to Kenosha, Wisconsin, says the riots there were not peaceful protests. He committed millions of dollars to fund law enforcement in the state. The CDC is imposing a temporary ban on evictions through the end of 2020. According to a White House announcement, the CDC will publish the order this Friday. Police made over 350 arrests in less than 2 months under Operation Legend, and over 30 arrests are in cases of homicide. Representative Joe Kennedy concedes defeat to incumbent Senator Ed Markey. It's the first time a Kennedy has ever lost a race for Congress in Massachusetts. And the U.S. wants to level the playing field for U.S. farmers. The Trump administration seeks talks with Mexico over its fruit and vegetable imports. President Trump commits funds to law enforcement in Wisconsin. Money is also going to small businesses in Kenosha that had their property smashed or burned down during last week's riots.
President Trump visiting Kenosha, Wisconsin, said the violence and destruction previously observed in the city were acts of domestic terror. The National Guard were sent in last week, and reports of rioting have since stopped.
And this was an example of what can happen when you do it right.
Speaking at a roundtable, the president committed to provide financial help to clean up and restore the city.
We will provide $1 million to the Kenosha law enforcement so that you have some extra money to go out and do what you have to do.
The president said he's also providing nearly $4 million for small businesses that suffered damage by arsonists. Another $42 million will go to support public safety statewide. That's funding for law enforcement, prosecutors, and to provide services for the victims of crime. A Kenosha city official said that the cost to replace damaged city-owned property comes to nearly $2 million. The damaged items include smashed lights and traffic signals, sign damage, and garbage trucks set ablaze. President Trump said he doesn't believe that there is a problem with systemic racism in policing.
That's the change they want. They want law and order. They want the police to be police. They want the police to do what they do better than anybody else in the world.
He said police are under tremendous pressure, and sometimes that can cause someone to make an error of judgment under pressure. The president spoke about others who want change. He said the change they want is greater support for the police. President Trump said that riots being labeled as peaceful protests goes in stark contrast to the scenes of destruction that are left in their wake.
An executive order issued last month by the president has led to a new ban on evictions. The CDC issued the ban to help prevent the spread of the virus, and it will remain in effect through the end of the year. The CDC is imposing a temporary ban on evictions through the end of 2020. That's according to the White House and follows an executive order by President Trump. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention says the order is to prevent the further spread of the virus. The White House noted it's essential that Americans have an effective place to quarantine, isolate, and social distance. All renters who qualified for direct payments under the CARES Act are eligible. This means those who earn no more than $99,000 a year or couples who file a joint return and make $198,000 a year or less. In a statement, the president said he wants to make it unmistakably clear that he's protecting people from evictions. The order includes a declaration for renters to sign and pass on to their landlords. The White House announcement said those who benefit from this assistance are still obligated to pay accrued rent or housing payments in accordance with their lease or contract. The form will be made available on the CDC's website on Friday, September 4th. Seattle police are investigating after they found weapons during a park cleanup. Officers obtained a warrant and took the items as evidence. The police department says officers recovered homemade spike strips, a machete, a hatchet, unexploded mortar, and dozens of makeshift shields inside a tent. Law enforcement was providing security for the Seattle Parks Department when the discovery was made. Workers were cleaning a park that's been closed since June when they found the weapons. No arrests have been made, but the investigation is ongoing. Likewise, in Minnesota, business owners are paying sky-high demolition costs to clean up the aftermath from the riots. In some cases, the costs to demolish the buildings are almost as high as the property itself.
Business owners in Minneapolis and St. Paul are paying astronomical prices to demolish what remains of their businesses. The Minneapolis Star-Tribune reports, after rioters destroyed the sports dome in St. Paul, contractors told the owners it would cost up to $285,000 to demolish the building and take away the debris. The owners said their insurance only covers up to $25,000 in demolition costs. The owner of Chicago Furniture Warehouse says he was first quoted $18,000 to get his store demolished, but the contractor started revising the cost. It's now over $130,000. Contractors say because debris from burned-out buildings is considered hazardous, the costs are higher. A large demolition company in Minnesota says the regulations could double demolition costs for riot-related work. With demolition costs so high, many rebuilding projects have come to a stop. Right now, large sections of Minneapolis and St. Paul are stuck with burned-out buildings and piles of rubble. Some owners aren't sure what to do and hope city officials can do more. Steve Poor, Minneapolis Director of Development Services, says, "We understand there is a role for the city to make this happen. We are looking at what is possible."
So far, over 350 arrests have been made under Operation Legend. Among those arrests, 30 were murder, and the DOJ is adding more federal agents to join the crackdown on violent gangs.
Operation Legend was launched in Kansas City on July 8th. It's an initiative of the Trump administration to address the increase in homicides and violent crimes across the United States. It's doing so by stepping up the activity of anti-crime task forces in hard-hit cities. So far, over 350 arrests have been made by law enforcement. Out of those, over 30 were homicide cases. The operation is named after 4-year-old Legend Taliaferro. He was shot and killed while he was asleep in his home in Kansas City in June. During the operation, agents and officers seized 122 firearms. The arrests and seizing of firearms are directly in line with what the operation originally aimed to achieve.
Operation Legend aims to immediately help our police agencies and our local leadership to prevent additional victims.
Federal agents from various agencies work together on the operation. The agents come from the FBI, DEA, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, and the U.S. Marshal Service. Barr said more street agents will be added to the task forces to help solve murders and take down the violent gangs.
San Francisco hair salons were closed under shutdown orders until yesterday, but House Speaker Nancy Pelosi enjoyed a blowout in one of them on Monday. She was also seen not wearing a mask.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited a San Francisco hair salon for a blowout on Monday, but the shop has been closed since March in accordance with virus prevention measures. In security footage obtained by Fox News, the Democratic Congresswoman can be seen walking through a San Francisco hair salon with wet hair. A mask appears to hang around her neck instead of covering her nose and mouth. Hair salons in the city weren't allowed to operate at the time. They could only reopen with outdoor hairstyling services starting September 1st. The salon's owner, Erica Caius, told the news outlet that Pelosi booked an appointment through an independent stylist who rents chair space in her salon. She said the fact that Pelosi received a wash and a blow-dry while salons have been shut down since March was like a slap in the face. She said receiving a blowout goes against current safety precautions put in place for hair salons. Caius highlighted her disbelief that Pelosi didn't wear a mask, noting that she's someone the public is supposed to look up to. According to a spokesman for Pelosi, the salon informed the speaker they were allowed to provide service for one customer at a time, per city rules. They added that Pelosi complied with the rules that were presented to her by the business.
In a historic first, a member of the Kennedy family has lost an election in Massachusetts. Voters chose nominees for the 9 U.S. House seats and 1 Senate seat.
Incumbent Ed Markey beat Representative Joe Kennedy in the state's Democratic Senate primary late Tuesday. Polls closed around 8 p.m. With nearly 44% of precincts reporting, Markey had 54.3%. Kennedy had 45.7% of the votes. Kennedy told supporters that he called Markey to concede the race and that he will now work to help Markey's re-election. The 39-year-old representative is the grandson of former Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Former President John Kennedy and late Senator Ted Kennedy were his great-uncles. It's the first time a Kennedy has been defeated in a race for Congress in Massachusetts. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi endorsed Kennedy last month, and he initially led in the polls. But Markey turned the race around by backing progressive causes, including the Green New Deal and Medicare for All. 74-year-old Markey has been in Congress for more than 4 decades. He will now face Republican Kevin O'Connor, an attorney, in the general election on November 3rd.
The United States wants high-level talks with Mexico over its produce imports. The Trump administration says it's trying to level the playing field for American farmers. The Trump administration is seeking senior-level talks with Mexico over imports of perishable fruits and vegetables. It's part of a broader push to help U.S. farmers. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, or USTR, also wants an investigation into increased blueberry imports and how it's affected American growers of the fruit. If the U.S. International Trade Commission finds that imports have hurt domestic growers, the U.S. could impose tariffs. The U.S. Trade Representative said President Trump recognizes the challenges faced by American farmers and is committed to promoting and securing fair trade and a level playing field for all American producers. The USTR said it would also seek talks with Mexico in the next 90 days over other imports, such as Mexican strawberries and bell peppers. It said it would help domestic producers start an investigation over similar concerns. In response, Mexico said it will defend the preferential access of Mexican agricultural exports to the United States, but it will also try to find a mutually satisfactory solution. Coming up, New York City shootings have nearly doubled this year compared to last. We look at some of the possible causes for this crime increase and ask residents and community leaders what they consider possible solutions. And schools in New York City were scheduled to reopen on September 10th, but that day has been put off. The city's mayor wants to guarantee a smooth reopening. More on that when we return. The FBI is getting involved after reports that someone was flying in a jetpack above the Los Angeles International Airport. 2 American airline pilots say they saw him 30 yards from their plane on Sunday at their altitude of 3,000 feet. The FBI says it's aware of those reports and is working to find out what happened. In one of the audio of conversations between air traffic controllers and pilots, controllers told the pilot that the jetpack flyer was seen 300 yards from that plane. New York City has been hit hard by gun violence over the past couple of months. The NYPD says there has been a 95% increase in firearm violence since last year. But the question is, how do we put an end to it? The NYPD commissioner says they're trying their best amid the recent budget cut. And some New York residents tell us solutions start by building relationships with people who are at high risks of resorting to guns. And NTD's Melina Weiskup has more on that.
The crime rate in NYC continues to climb. The NYPD reported the number of shooting incidents nearly doubling this year when compared to last year. The Brooklyn Borough president says police may have contributed to the increased crime. He accused the NYPD of purposely slowing down their response times out of retaliation. But NYPD commissioner denies that claim and says there is another side to the equation, that is, lack of resources, after the department suffered a $1 billion budget cut, which he says took thousands of officers off the streets.
You know, it just boggles my mind. I think it's cheap theater. I think it's politics. They've been out there getting hurt. A cop last night taking a gun off the street in the Bronx, breaking his hand in the process with a struggling perpetrator.
But some New York City residents say the solution isn't as simple as tracking down guns, that it starts with building relationships with those who may be prone to committing gun crimes.
We can't keep guns off the street. That's like something that we don't have the power to do. But our presence and our involvement with those who may have access to a gun, we can change the narrative sometimes, by just being in that person's ear, being consistent with them, letting them know, look, you got something wrong with you, bro, you come talk to me, call my phone.
He says that this type of relationship building and positive influence is what changed his mind and kept him off the streets and out of trouble. He's part of this community organization called SOS, or Save Our Streets, with the goal to end gun violence in New York City. One of the organization's leaders says a key component is reminding people of their self-worth.
But we know that deep down inside everybody, they've been blessed with a talent and a gift from God. And so we tap into that and we bring it out of them.
Both the community organization and the NYPD are preparing to do what they can to prevent gun violence as we approach this Labor Day weekend. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says he wants to ensure a smooth beginning to the school year. Even under the challenging circumstances, schools were scheduled to reopen on September 10th, but that day was since put off.
New York City Public Schools will delay the start of classes by 11 days to September 21st due to the virus. The agreement was made with education unions that had pushed for additional safety measures. New York City has the largest school system in the U.S.
What would have happened on September 10th now happens on September 21st. So it's blended learning. Some kids in school one day, other kids in school another day.
Unions led by United Federation of Teachers had expressed concern that the city was rushing things by reopening school on September 10th. They said more adequate steps to protect teachers, students, and staff from infections were needed. The union's president even threatened to strike unless schools implemented a rigorous virus testing plan and other safety measures. The strike would have actually been illegal under state law. However, with the delay of reopening, he no longer saw the need to strike and even praised the changes.
Still to come, another round of flooding for China's famous Yangtze River. Within 24 hours, its water level in some areas rose a whopping 17 feet after heavy rains. And the U.S. looks to form a NATO-like alliance to counter the Chinese regime. U.S. officials plan to meet with Australia, Japan, and India for talks this fall. That and more after the break. Now we turn to China, where the country's longest river is suffering through another round of flooding. Heavy rains sent water levels soaring in the upper reaches on Monday. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
Another round of flooding has drenched southwestern China. Heavy rains sent the water level soaring in Tuesday in the upper reaches of the Yangtze River. Its tributaries in Sichuan province and other areas are also affected. In the Yangtze River's Chongqing section, the water level rose an additional 17 feet within 24 hours on Monday. Floodwaters are also pouring out of the Three Gorges Dam, located in the middle reaches of the river. It's releasing water at a rate of over 30,000 cubic meters per second. Red level warnings for heavy rain were issued in some areas. That's as many rivers again reached or exceeded their overflow warning levels. On Sunday, a mountain landslide blocked roads in Sichuan province. One video captured an excavator at work, while a landslide continued behind it. Parts of Chengdu, the capital city of Sichuan, were flooded on Sunday and Monday. The onslaught submerged streets and damaged property. Some locals described it as something not seen in 100 years. A video captured muddy floodwaters pooling into a house via windows and doors. It even showed one family's dinner still cooking as rising water threatens to submerge the stove. Because the city was built in a mountainous area, the floodwater was receding relatively quickly. But the mess it left behind won't dissipate so easily. A new report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, or ASPI, says the CCP is increasingly deploying coercive diplomacy against foreign governments and companies. The report, titled The Chinese Communist Party's Coercive Diplomacy, describes over 150 cases of coercive diplomacy in nearly 30 countries over the past decade. According to the report, there's been a sharp escalation in these tactics since 2018. The countries and regions with the most recorded instances include Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, and East Asia. According to the report, the coercive tactics include economic measures like trade sanctions and tourism bans, and non-economic like arbitrary detention, restrictions on official travel, and state-issued threats. The research draws on media, policy papers, academic research, and government reports to identify the CCP methods of coercion through trade sanctions and threats. The report also found a sharp rise in threats after the pandemic began. The report states China is the largest trading partner for nearly 2/3 of the world's countries. But foreign governments' growing dependency on the Chinese market increases its successful coercion efforts. But the report suggests a solution for other countries to counter the CCP's coercive diplomacy through a coordinated and sustained international effort. It adds that a number of foreign governments, including those of Australia, Canada, Japan, India, the UK, and the US, are working on ways to develop an effective counter-coercion strategy. Now we turn to Germany. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is visiting Berlin and talked with his German counterpart, Heiko Maas, about some sensitive issues.
We
won't allow it to become the plaything of a superpower competition between the United States, Russia, and China. We want to be in dialogue with everyone.
As the most important country in the EU, Germany talked about Europe's call for fair and democratic elections to take place quickly in Hong Kong and for the national security law in the region to be revoked.
Our common European appeal remains the call for quick and uninhibited elections for the Legislative Council and that the restrictions on the security law be lifted. We Europeans agree on that.
Maas also said that threats have no place, referring to a conflict between Beijing and the Czech Republic because of a visit to Taiwan by the Czech Senate Speaker. Wang said the top Czech official will pay a heavy price for it.
We Europeans act in very close cooperation on foreign and security policy issues, and we treat our international partners with respect. We expect the same from them, and threats have no place here.
Maas also said Wang had indicated a readiness to allow access to an independent monitoring mission of the United Nations to camps in Xinjiang housing Muslim Uyghurs.
A prominent Hong Kong activist says Germany has a special responsibility to defend democratic values and freedom. NTD's Germany correspondent Christian Watson has the story.
On the same day that the Chinese foreign minister visited Berlin, prominent Hong Kong activist Nathan Law came to the German capital. He had a message for Germany: less talk, more action.
Well, it's important that we keep reminding the German public and the government that the appeasement strategy that they've been using, the dialogue-based diplomacy, is not working.
Other countries like the US and the UK have recently taken steps to confront China's growing authoritarianism. But Germany traditionally treads cautiously with Beijing. In Berlin, Law joined forces with German lawmakers who are part of a global coalition. The Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China advocates a new approach toward the CCP. Law went into self-imposed exile in London after Beijing imposed the so-called national security law on the city. He's now reportedly sought under the law, accused of inciting secession and collusion with foreign and external forces. Law and his allies want to see Europe imposing sanctions on Hong Kong officials who violate human rights, following the lead of the US. Additionally, he said lifeboat plans are crucial. Those would make it easier for Hong Kongers to seek asylum or gain visas.
So I hope that this could be implemented by Germany, and Germany could take the lead to change the Europe in terms of China policy.
So far, as the only tangible step, Germany suspended its extradition treaty with Hong Kong. And some observers say the EU is unlikely to agree on a joint China policy in the near future. In Berlin, Law joined groups like Uyghurs and Tibetans that are persecuted in China for protest in front of the German Foreign Affairs Ministry.
And we fight this long battle together until we conquer, until democracy prevails, and until every single one of us have our freedom and our basic human rights again.
He said the deteriorating situation in Hong Kong should serve as a wake-up call for Western democracies, and that Germany's own experience with totalitarianism gives it a special responsibility to defend democratic values and freedom. Reporting by Christian Watson, NTD News, Berlin.
In its yearly report to Congress, the Department of Defense says the Chinese regime is looking to strengthen its military presence overseas. The department says this could boost the regime's offensive strategies against the U.S. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on the report.
China's military, known as the People's Liberation Army, or PLA, already has a base in Djibouti, Africa. But according to the DoD, the communist regime is planning to expand the PLA in a way that could disrupt U.S. military operations. The Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense said in an interview with the American Enterprise Institute that China's been making more noise about its plan to build up its military.
Those basing facilities, as you notice, are important. They're testing, they're trying to explore, they're trying to understand, they're trying to devise and come up with plans about where and what types of bases and how they might use those facilities overseas best.
The DoD's yearly China military power report says the Chinese Communist Party is very likely considering building military bases in Myanmar, Thailand, and a number of other locations. These bases could give the regime more support to its naval, air, and ground forces if said countries let it happen. But the DoD is also looking at China's arsenal. The department estimates that China has about a low 200 nuclear warheads, and the CCP plans to double that number by the next decade.
Just looking at number of warheads by itself is not the entire picture, or doesn't paint a holistic understanding of where the Chinese are or maybe where they want to go.
The deputy assistant says the CCP is also looking to buff up its number of ballistic missiles, submarines, and other PLA weaponry. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper said on Twitter that modernizing the U.S.'s nuclear force and readiness is essential to a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
The U.S. is looking to form a defense alliance on the Indo-Pacific region, similar to NATO. If formed, it would aim to counter China. A State Department official says high-level authorities from India, U.S., Australia, and Japan will meet in Delhi this fall for talks.
The U.S. aims to form a NATO-like defense alliance in the Indo-Pacific. That's according to the U.S. State Department's #2 official.
The Indo-Pacific region is actually lacking in strong multilateral structures. They don't have anything of the fortitude of NATO or the European Union. There is certainly an invitation there at some point to formalize a structure like this.
The alliance would be based on the U.S. current strategic ties with India, Japan, and Australia, also known as the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or the Quad. But the U.S. official says the participants could expand beyond that.
The Quad isn't exclusive. I think there's plenty of reason to bring in other countries into this discussion as well. But remember, even NATO started with relatively modest expectations, and a number of countries chose neutrality over NATO membership in post-World War II Europe.
Experts see the move as implicitly aiming to counter China in the Indo-Pacific. But the official says Beijing is not their only goal.
I don't think responding to the threat of China in and of itself, or any potential challenge from China in and of itself, would be enough of a driver, though. It also has to have a positive agenda.
He said that high-level officials from the 4 countries will meet in India this fall. China views the Quad country alliance with suspicion. Any country that sides with the West, especially the U.S., often faces scrutiny from the Chinese regime. Now, amid the pandemic and China's border clashes with India, all 4 members' relations with Beijing are now in decline. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Coming up, Walmart is getting ready to take on Amazon Prime with its new Walmart Plus membership program. It features cheaper fees and various perks. America's pandemic economy shows a shift in consumer spending habits. Nike Air Max sneakers and Lululemon yoga pants are hot items. That and more after the break. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin testifies before the House Select Subcommittee on the CCP virus. His comments come after thousands of loans came under suspicion for fraud. out of the more than $650 billion worth of taxpayer-funded loans, tens of thousands of them may have been subject to fraud, waste, and abuse. At an afternoon hearing, the panel's chairman rebuked Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin for previously testifying that delivering aid quickly meant the Treasury would run into waste issues.
That is a false dichotomy. Taxpayers should not have to choose between quickly getting aid to those who need it and wasting federal funds. And there are simple steps that could have been taken to improve oversight and reduce fraud.
Democratic congressmen and the Trump administration have been at odds over next steps to boost the economy since July. That's after Congress approved trillions of dollars in March in response to the pandemic. So far, they've been unable to reach an agreement.
We are sensitive to the fact there is more work to be done, and certain areas of the economy require additional relief.
The Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, provided more than $5 million forgivable loans through the U.S. Small Business Administration. It ended on August 8th. The Democrat-led panel found more than 600 loans went to companies barred from doing business with the government, making them ineligible. Another 350 went into contractors with already existing performance problems. Walmart unveiled the perks of its new membership program. It will grant subscribers unlimited free delivery, fuel discounts, and no checkout lines at a lower annual fee than Amazon Prime.
Walmart is finally ready to take on Amazon Prime. The world's largest retailer on Tuesday unveiled the details for its own membership program called Walmart Plus. At $98 a year, that's cheaper than the $119 annual fee for Amazon Prime. Walmart Plus customers will get unlimited free delivery. Same-day delivery on more than 160,000 items is also available, but for that, the order has to be at least $35. There's a discount on gasoline, and Plus members can also skip in-store checkout lines using the Walmart app. By launching Walmart Plus, the retailer is playing both defense and offense. It wants to stop Amazon from muscling in on its dominance when it comes to selling food and other groceries, while at the same time it wants to steal market share from Amazon. Last quarter, Walmart saw its online sales nearly double, marking the biggest growth in online business the company has ever seen.
Get ready to fork over some serious cash if you want to be among the first with the latest Samsung technology.
The Galaxy Z Fold 2 and the experiences that come with it can be yours on September 18th. Pre-orders start today, so don't wait to reserve yours now.
Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 2 features a front screen and a larger inner screen once unfolded. While its glass is ultra thin, its price is hefty, costing nearly $2,000. But Samsung is offering some benefits to help entice customers. VIP benefits include access to Michelin star restaurants and elite golf courses in the U.S. Instant coffee, Lululemon yoga pants, and Nike Air Max sneakers are all in, but Burberry luxury trench coats are out. Welcome to America's new consumer economy. It's like nothing we've ever seen before.
In America's new stay-at-home economy, Lululemon yoga pants and Nike Air Max sneakers are in. Burberry trench coats are out. A Reuters analysis shows just how the COVID-19 crisis has given rise to a new consumer, one whose mindset around everything from clothing to food has shifted after months of working from home. And rising demand for certain items needed while staying home has driven up prices. Americans are shelling out significantly more money on coffee, eggs, sliced ham, and cheese, which have become more expensive. And while some consumer experts complain that the rising prices are because retailers and big brands are cutting back on promotions, others point out that companies have had to grapple with costly production shifts. And when it comes to splurge items, demand and prices have also increased for items like men's Nike Air Max sneakers and Lululemon yoga pants. Both will cost you more than $100, but at a time with no commute and few social gatherings, demand for a more expensive item, a $2,000 Burberry women's trench coat, has declined. Experts say the pandemic and its economic consequences are moving targets, and it's unclear when American life and consumer behavior will revert to normal.
Coming up, Cambodia's main political persecutor during the Khmer Rouge era has died at age 77. He oversaw the execution of at least 14,000 people. Australia's economy shrinks and enters its first recession in almost 30 years. An Australian official says the CCP virus is to blame. That and more after the break. A Khmer Rouge commander is dead. He was Pol Pot's premier executioner and secretary-chief, and he oversaw the mass murder of at least 14,000 Cambodians.
The notorious commander who oversaw the mass murder of at least 14,000 Cambodians died on Wednesday at the age of 77. Known as Comrade Duch, Kongwek Uv was former Prime Minister Pol Pot's premier executioner and security chief at the notorious Tuol Sleng prison. A tribunal spokesman for the Khmer Rouge, which Duch was a leader of, said he died at the Khmer Soviet Friendship Hospital in the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh. He gave no details of the cause, but Duch had been ill in recent years. Duch was the first member of the Khmer Rouge leadership to face trial for his role in a regime responsible for at least 1.7 million deaths in the killing fields of Cambodia during the Khmer Rouge's reign of terror from 1975 to 1979. In 2010, a United Nations tribunal found him guilty of mass murder, torture, and crimes against humanity at Tuol Sleng Prison, the former Phnom Penh high school which still stands as a memorial to the atrocities committed inside. He was given a life sentence 2 years later after his appeal that he was just a junior official following orders was rejected. By the time of his trial, Duch was a born-again Christian and expressed regret for his crimes. Under his leadership, detainees at Tuol Sleng Prison, codenamed S21, were ordered to suppress cries of agony as Khmer Rouge guards, many of whom were teenagers, sought to extract confessions for non-existent crimes through torture. The guards were instructed to smash to bits traitors and counter-revolutionaries. For the Khmer Rouge, that could mean anyone from school teachers to children to pregnant women and intellectuals identified as such for wearing glasses. At S21, new prisoners had their mugshots taken. Hundreds are now on display within the crumbling walls of the prison, which has since been converted into a museum.
Over to Europe, a new opposition party is formed in Belarus, aiming to enact constitutional reform. But this act has caused some confusion among opposition ranks. NTD UK's Neil Woodrow will bring us more news from Europe.
Thanks. Welcome to the UK newsroom, bringing UK and European news. In Belarus, there is confusion in the opposition ranks as the forming of a new political party is announced.
Maria Kolesnikova, who supported exiled opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya in her election campaign, announcing a new political party called Together. The party included Viktor Babarenko, who was jailed and barred from running in the August 9th presidential election.
The country is in a political and socio-economic crisis, and together we know how to exit this crisis. Hundreds and thousands of Belarusians, talented professionals, are ready to take responsibility and build a new Belarus together.
The announcement drew rebuke from Tikhanovskaya, who was President Lukashenko's main opponent in the presidential election. She argues that the aim of the new party to enact constitutional reform is a distraction from the main goal of removing Lukashenko. Tikhanovskaya fled into exile 2 days after the election. From her new base in Lithuania, she declared herself the rightful winner and launched an opposition council to hold fresh elections and ensure a peaceful transfer of power. She says the council shouldn't be dominated by any political party. Kolesnikova's camp says it does not wish to disrupt the work of the council.
Thousands of students boycotted the start of the school year in Belarus. Hundreds staged marches and collected signatures outside, calling for Lukashenko to step down. Moving on, the UK is trying to get Britons to return to work. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said at a cabinet meeting that Britons were returning to their workplaces in huge numbers. But the data says only 17% returned to their offices in August. In the US, in a LinkedIn survey of over 1,000 office workers, 69% of them say they're back at the workplace. In order to get the economy back up to speed, a new campaign will start this week, urging more people to return to their workplaces. And tens of millions of students are returning to school in Europe, and for many, face masks are compulsory.
Hand sanitising stations, social distancing and staggered playtimes are the new normal as countries across Europe seek ways to get children back into the classroom safely. For many children in the UK, this is the first time they've been back to school since late March.
Lots of good things about being back at school, getting to see my friends and just getting to play with my mates again.
In France, school attendance is mandatory and students over 11 must wear masks at all times, including indoors. Are pupils nervous about the CCP virus?
No, if I comply with the instructions I have been told, no, I'm not afraid.
With balloons and flowers for some students in Russia, the first day back at school looks more like a celebration. Children in Moscow are not required to wear masks in school. Teachers are required, though, except while teaching as long as they're a safe distance from the children.
According to UNESCO, at the height of global CCP virus lockdowns in April, some 1.5 billion children were affected by school closures. Retirement homes in France have experienced a high number of COVID-19 deaths, but a care home in the southeast region has been spared from the disease, and now they're celebrating.
A giant birthday cake, music and dancing. Marie-Juliette Marle at Saint-Juliette Care Home is celebrating her 104th birthday.
The virus. Are you scared of the virus? No. Life goes on, recreational activity also. We are doing everything so that our residents can go on with their lives as if COVID-19 didn't exist.
And visits from family members were prohibited for nearly 2 months.
We were worried, but we kept sending her letters. We knew everything was being done here and that no one had contracted the disease, so that was quite a relief to know that.
Workers are required to take their temperature several times a day and be tested every 2 weeks.
And 700 adventurous swimmers plunge into the fast-flowing waters of the Danube in Budapest, Hungary.
The swimmers are taking part in an event that's part of the Budapest Urban Games. It encourages residents to make use of the city's parks, roads and waterways as sporting venues.
Every year, we try to inform people that the Danube is clean. Since 2010, we have channeled all sewage water into the southern sewage cleaning plant. What is also very important is that there are no eddies, only at the foot of the bridges, but we are far from those.
The biggest challenge for most are the currents, but not all.
Actually, to swim in our beautiful river is not a big challenge. That's a great feeling. You know, I'm born in Budapest, I live in Budapest, and I make a lot of sports activities in Budapest, and that's just a certain moment in our life to swim in this beautiful river, and everybody have to try.
Only about 20 to 25 swimmers are allowed in the water at one time to ensure safety and social distancing. The Danube is Europe's second longest river. It travels through 10 countries.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Over to New York.
Australia is now technically in a recession. The country fell into its deepest economic slump on record last quarter. Figures showed the economy shrank 7% in the 3 months to the end of June.
Worrying times for Australia's economy as newly released figures show a record fall for the last quarter, meaning the country has entered its first recession for nearly 30 years.
Our record run of 28 consecutive years of economic growth has now officially come to an end. The cause? A once-in-a-century pandemic. The effect? A COVID-19 induced recession.
Data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics show the country's $2 trillion Aussie dollar economy, or 1.47 trillion US, shrank 7% in the 3 months to the end of June. More than 1 million people have lost their jobs since March, when Australia shut down entire sectors of the economy. But some better news came from the Australian state of Victoria on Wednesday. It's been a hotspot of a second wave of coronavirus infections, but restrictions were eased further as the infection rate continued to fall. 90 new cases were reported, a third straight day of double-digit new cases, indicating that strict lockdown measures were working. It was only last month that daily new infections peaked at more than 700.
Coming up, we see how dogs in the UK are faring with the eased lockdown measures. Owners say their pups may have gotten too attached to the family while everyone was locked indoors. No New York State Fair this year, but that's not keeping the American Dairy Association from displaying its annual showcase. The ADA unveiled this year's butter sculpture at the New York Fairgrounds. The sculpture reflects its 2020 theme, Nourishing Our Future. Artists used 800 pounds of butter to create this sculpture. They say it pays tribute to those who ensure children are nourished and learning, whether at school or at home. Some dog owners are noticing that their furry friends are having a tough time adjusting to the eased-up lockdown. One British puppy in the UK is showing signs of separation anxiety as her owner heads back to work.
8-month-old Luna the Labrador looks relaxed now, but she has gone through some rough changes over the past few weeks. After having her new family all to herself indoors for a while, now she has to get used to them spending more time out of the house and less time by her side.
So we decided to just go for a walk around the block to see what would happen. So locked her into the kitchen, as we would have done, and shut the front door, and she started barking.
Saunders and her family took little Luna home just 3 weeks before the lockdown started in the UK. Since everyone was self-isolating, the pup barely got any socialization with other dogs for the first part of her life. Instead, she spent all her time getting close to her human family.
She's like my shadow. I'm working from home. She's laying beside me the whole day. I get up and go and make a cup of tea. She's there with me. And that's what probably the main issue I've heard from a lot of other dog owners.
Research by Humane Society, the Dogs Trust, has found that many pets are now showing behavioral problems and are confused by their owners' changing behavior since the lockdowns have eased. Here at the park, these owners say they're concerned about what coming out of lockdown will mean for their dogs.
I think he's got really used to having the kids around. Obviously, with them being off school for the last 6 months or so, they've become really, really close. They've formed a really special friendship, which has been lovely for them, especially with the kids not seeing their friends so much. I think when they go back to school, he's going to be pretty sad.
One animal care assistant from the RSPCA, an animal welfare charity, suggests that training dogs to be comfortable when the owners leave is the key to helping them adjust.
Pick up the keys, put them down again and reward the dog for being calm, which will hopefully then in turn work when you're leaving the house so the dog doesn't find it such a big thing to deal with.
And surprisingly, she says playing classical music is also known to have calming effects on dogs. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And that's all for now. Catch us again at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Jasmina Davis.